If you just opened up Serum for the first time or you've had it for a while and you're just not getting the hang of it, this video is for you. It's a complete comprehensive guide on how to use Serum, every single control, and most importantly, we're gonna look at a practical way to implement all these controls to start creating your own sound design within Serum. Before we get into the video, I wanna mention that this video is part of a complete 30-day course I just dropped. It is absolutely flames. It's over 17 hours of content. It's $100, but for my subscribers, it's half off. So it's under 50 bucks. The link's in the description. It's definitely worth checking out. Let's get into the video. So what Serum is it's a synthesizer that's been around for a while. It came from a company called Xfer that was started by this producer and artist named Steve Duda and Deadmau5 actually. So they started this company back in the early 2000s. And in 2014, they came out with this synthesizer Serum. And so there's like a ton of different synthesizers for electronic music out there today. There's some super crazy and comprehensive one, but Serum is the reigning champion of combination of like user friendliness versus ability to pretty much make any sound and a super high quality sound. So we've had VSTs and plugins before, like Massive by Native Instruments, and Massive was the go-to synth for a long time for dubstep and stuff like that. However, it kind of aged and now it's not really used too much. Whereas Serum is used just as much today as it was when it came out in 2014. It's extremely capable. It's probably the most user-friendly synthesizer. You can make insane sounds with it. You can literally make anything from like a dubstep growl to like a guitar pluck. So it's super versatile as well. What Serum actually is, it's a wavetable synthesizer. So what that means is it takes the input from a wavetable and uses that in a fashion of subtractive synthesis to get to a certain point of making a sound. And then we can run it through all different sorts of effects and modulate and automate it. If that's confusing to you, do not worry. We're going to go over every single thing. Let's get into it. So we're just going to hop right into it. I'm going to start by kind of talking about these sections here and what we're looking at. If you're super overwhelmed right now, I totally get where you're at. I remember the first time I opened this, it looks very intimidating, especially if you're not familiar with synthesis, but it's really simple actually. So what we have here is we have 4 noise generators. So we have our sub generator, our noise generator, and then our 2 wavetables. So these, for lack of a better term, is what creates our noise generators. Then we have a filter. So a filter like a low pass or a high pass or any sort of filter we want to run these noises through. We have a number of different filters here. We'll get into those. And then down here we have our modulators. So we have a combination of envelopes, LFOs, and different settings down here. So the difference between an envelope and an LFO is an envelope plays once. So it goes through one revolution of its settings and then it's done. So ADSR, or attack, delay, sustain, and release, is a very typical synthesis term. And that's basically how fast the noise comes in, how long it lasts when it's up at the top, how long it takes to get back to the bottom, and then how long it takes to release it fully. So we basically have these 4 settings and we can use this to shape our sound. So with an envelope, it's typically always tied to the volume. So we can map other stuff to this if we want, but most of the time, the master volume of the preset or the sample is tied to the envelope. So say if we come up here and we make this long, then our sound's gonna last a longer amount of time. And you could just come in here and drag these down. So if we wanted something like a pluck, we would just shape the envelope of the volume this way. And we have several other envelopes if we want to map stuff to it. So basically, these down here are envelopes and our LFOs. We can map whatever we want to them. So they're giving us all these different options for mapping stuff, and we'll get into that momentarily. So LFOs are similar to envelopes, except you have more settings, so you have more ability, more flexibility here to make changes. So we can come in here and make all kinds of curves, all kinds of adjustments. As opposed to here on our envelope, we only have attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release. So we can make all kinds of crazy moves here, and then we have a lot more settings for triggering it. So like we talked about, the envelope only plays through once, and then it's done. It's triggered, it goes through, and it's done. With an LFO, it can re-trigger, so it can go in a loop. Let's set this to something so we can kind of hear what we're talking about. So let's say we're going to map this to the envelope. And it's just, we're just using this LFO to modulate our cutoff, and it's just repeating and repeating. And then envelope, this setting is similar to here where it just goes through once. So triggers is just gonna keep going, keep going, keep going. So with trigger, it's going to start from here when you press the MIDI note. And by the way, in case it wasn't obvious, I'm using a MIDI keyboard to trigger these notes. So once we press trigger, it's going to start here and play through until we let it go. Envelope, it's going to start here and play through once. And off, it's going to continually play around, but it's going to start from where we stopped at. Then over here, we can actually load up LFO shapes. So I have like ones that I like, you know, for womps or stuff like that. So you can come in here and load your own. You can draw your own. There's a lot of flexibility here in our LFOs. We can have multiple voices within Serum. So we can either mono this or we can legato it. And then down here we have portamento, so we can have these like glide from note to note. So if we like crank this up. So that little bend to note is what the portamento is. Then down here we have a modulation wheel, so we can map this to whatever we want. We have our pitch wheel. Then we have 4 modulation knobs over here, and these are whatever we want to map them to. It's usually the parameter we're adjusting the most when we're within Serum. So now coming back up here to the noise generators, we're going to kind of circle back and talk about these in depth. The first one we have over here is a sub generator, which is cool because a lot of the times you're kind of in the weeds with your synthesis and you just want a clean sub. So we can just add a sub here. It's just going to stack a sub, which is basically just a sine wave on top of everything else that's going on. And then we can change this to the triangle, saw, square. And what's cool is a lot of these different noise generators have options for how we want to route them. So if we want this to just go straight out and we just want to pair a sub with our sound, we can do that without having it going through all the effects and all the processing we're going to talk about in a moment here. We can change the octave, we can pan it, and then change the level of it. So they just kind of toss in there a sub if you need it. Now coming down here to the noise generators, so this is exactly what it sounds like. It just generates noise. It's like white noise, different kind of ambient noise. There's all kinds of different like noises. Cool part about all these different noise oscillators and these wavetables when we get to them is you can actually import your own. So like these are like some specific cashmere sounds. And you can import your own if you want. And then same as the sub, we can make this go direct out if we don't want it to process with anything. So now getting to our star of the show, which is going to be our wavetable oscillators. Initially, it's going to come like this, and it's going to be wavetable 1 is going to be turned on, and wavetable 2 is going to be turned off. And what we have here, I'm going to go ahead and clear these settings. We have a basic saw wave. So if we click on this, this will show us like the wavetable from the top. And if we click again, it's just going to show it to us from the bottom. Also, if we click this little pencil here, this is a little bit more comprehensive. We can actually come in here and adjust our wavetables. So we can draw in how we want the wavetable to look. This stuff you probably won't really be using a whole lot. I find that there's a lot of different wavetables you have to choose from, and unless you want to like go in and manually edit a part of a wavetable, it's not really that practical to come in there and edit your wavetable. So let's go initialize this. But the option's there if you want to do it. So it starts off with a basic saw wave, which is literally just a sound wave traveling in this shape right here. So if we exit out of this for a second and we open up an oscilloscope, you can see this is how our sound is moving. And it's saw formation. So if we come over here and we switch this to something else, now it's in a sine wave. So just in case, you know, it's something you weren't aware of, this corresponds with the shape of the actual noise. The most used wavetable is basic shapes. And what this is it's different basic sound waves put together in a wavetable. So we can kind of scroll through these. We don't have to switch the wavetable. We can just come in here and find one we like. And the thing is, most sounds will be based from these basic shapes. So there are some super crazy wavetables in here. This little knob right here is how we scroll through the wavetable. But most of the time, your sounds will start from something basic like this. Then up here we have our options for our pitch, so we can move this up or down an octave. Semitones. Fin, which is sense. So basically the same as your mod or your pitch wheel. And coarse pitch is kind of like a combination of all these, and it's cohesive. We don't have to like move octave, semitones, and fin. We can just do it all from here. So kind of a different way to change the pitch. Then unison is going to be our voices. So this is going to be how many different voices we have. So if we move this up to 2, now you'll notice we have 2 of these different wavetables playing spread out from each other. Which brings me to our respace, which is literally just 2 detuned saw waves. So if we just grab 2 saw waves, detune them, our respace, which is funny because this is one of the most used sounds in electronic music, and it's very, very simple. That's kind of like the overall theme with sounds in general, is a lot of the times the most popular sounds we hear in electronic music are the simplest. So like a wub is literally just a low pass filter dialed in and different, of course, but a lot of these sounds we hear are super, super simple. Same thing with the super saw. A super saw is literally just a bunch of saw waves. So we crank up the unison and then come down here and maybe add some more voicing. And there's our super saw. So yeah, we'll get into kind of some sound design after, but I just wanted to point that out, that even though we have all these settings, a lot of the base of our most popular sounds are very simple. So it's kind of a cool thing to note. So we have unison and detune. So we have our how many voices and how spread they are as detuned. Then we have phase. So phase is where this is going to start. It's revolutions on. And then the random knob will alter the phase on each note. So as we just had mentioned, this is going to be the overall wavetable position. So if we grab a wavetable where we can kind of have some more data and see what's going on, this is going to just scroll through this wavetable. So what we're hearing right now is this wavetable playing in real time. There's some really crazy ones. Here's some from Excellent. You can import your own, and the crazy part is you can actually import a picture on here. So there's all kinds of crazy settings. Like I can come and grab, I'm gonna grab a random audio file I have here, and it has different import settings. So these are how it's gonna treat the sample once it's dropped in. And now we literally have this sound playing the sound waves, this drum loop we just dragged in, which is pretty cool. So you can actually incorporate a sample if you want. So you can bring in like a synthesizer or a vocal stab or whatever, and kind of use that to work off. So pretty cool feature. So down here, this knob is going to get a lot of action, and this is going to be the warp knob. This allows you to change different warp modes. So it's going to change and warp this wavetable based on different ways we determine. So I'm going to initialize this and get a normal wavetable so we can kind of hear what we're doing here. So we have settings like sync. It plays and repeats faster than normal. various different types of syncing. Bend will actually bend the waveform inwards. So like, see here we have these little bends. It's basically bending it on itself. So that's bend plus, and then bend minus is bending in the opposite way. And then PWM actually pushes the whole waveform to the left. And a sim is kind of like a combination of bend and PWM. We get a little bending going on there. A sim plus minus goes across the whole spectrum. Flip, so it's actually just going to invert. Mirror, it's actually going to mirror itself from the other side. So whatever we do to one side, it's going to change on the other. So remap means we can actually customize this. So we can actually come in here and make our changes. Open up maybe a preset. This is the same, but it's going to be a mirrored remapping. And this one is same, but it's known as sinusoidal. So it's just warping it again in kind of a unique way. 4 is like 2, but mirrored. And quantize is like a rate reduction almost. Like a bit reduction. And then we're going to talk about the famous FM from A and FM from B. So FM synthesis is its own topic in and of itself. It can get very comprehensive. Basically, we just saw here how using remap, we are using a different wavetable to modulate this wavetable. That's essentially what we're doing with FM synthesis. So if we come over here and we select FM from B, that means we're using this wavetable to modulate this wavetable. So if I turn this on and turn it down, because we don't need the volume from this, we're just using this wavetable to modulate this. What's happening is this wavetable is modulating based on the shape of this wavetable. So FM synthesis is super crazy. You get some really crazy tones out of it. I've found it really good for like those crazy like dubstep sustained basses. Really good for modulating sounds. We'll kind of go over some FM synthesis at a later time, but these settings are very, very big in Serum. That's a big thing people come to Serum for, is FM synthesis. Nowadays, everything has FM. So plugins like Phase Plant and pretty much all new synthesizers have FM to anything. So you can, with like Phase Plant, you can literally modulate anything from anything. But back then, this came out in 2014. This was a pretty big deal to have on a synthesizer like this. And the algorithm still sounds amazing. AM is similar, except it also takes into consideration amplitude. And RM is actually ring modulation. Then we can also FM from noise or FM from sub. So I really don't want you to get too caught up on all these, like having to memorize all these different kind of warping deals. They're cool to play around with. There's really a couple that you'll use a lot of the time. Sync's really popular, bend's really popular. So then finally we have pan and level. So self-explanatory, panning the sound and leveling the sound. Oscillator B is essentially exactly the same as oscillator A. It's just second. So these run concurrent with each other, so parallel. So like these are separate sounds. They're not coming from left to right or anything. And then we can choose here if we want to start filtering them together. So now we're made it over to the filter, and the filter is where a lot of your movement and a lot of your action is going to be. Most of the time in a sound, the movement and the primary changes in what we like about the sound is usually coming from the filter. So a lot of the times you'll see like basic shapes, like a saw wave up here, and then a lot of movement and some crazy stuff going on here. So filter, and we have a low pass, different shapes for the low pass, high pass, pretty much any filter you would need. They have a really big selection of filters. Peak, notch, and then when you come down here into misc, these ones are super crazy. So like a ring mod, like a telephony sound, and then we have like This reverb filter is super popular. French, German, formant. This sounds like formant, which is kind of like someone talking or someone's voice. And then, like I was saying, like a lot of the cool movement we get from these sounds. Is just coming from these filters. So within these filters, these A, B, N, and S stand for oscillator A, oscillator B, noise, and sub. So which one of these modules, or all of them, do we want to go through this formant filter? So say we want this one to go straight out. We want oscillator B to just go onto our effects, and we want oscillator B to go through the formant filter. We would just leave this checked. Or we want everything to go through the noise, the sub. And then resonant increases the resonant peaks, pan is pan left to right, and then drive will boost everything upwards. And this button will change depending on what filter we're working with. So if we come over here like comb filter, we have damp. So these are different settings particular to the filter they're on. And then the mix. So if we only want to use a little bit of this, we can mix it in. Initialize this again. So, I mean, that's pretty much everything on the face until we get into the FX and the matrix and everything. So again, really simple. Oscillator A, oscillator B are filter, sub and noise if we want to use them. And then all these down here are for modulating stuff. And as far as modulating, I've already done this a couple times, but it's literally just drag and drop. So any of these tabs here, LFO, envelope, we can literally just drag on what we want them to modulate. So if I come over to here to cutoff, and now the cutoff of this filter is being modulated by the shape of this LFO. So we can come in here and adjust the trigger, the speed. Change the shape however we want it. And then this is actually a new update as of a couple years ago. We can modulate a curve. So we can put this on like, let's put on macro 1. And we can actually modulate the changes in the LFO. There's all kinds of crazy stuff we can do with these points here. Load up one of Lumberjacks, which is a really good producer at Icon Collective. I learned a lot from him. And he gave us his Then if we don't want this to go the full distance, like of the cutoff, we can actually turn this down. So we can turn it down. Or we can click this little blue half circle here to adjust the amount. So if we want it to go like all the way, and we'll click and drag this down to decrease the amount. And then we can modulate anything else, this LFO. Let's bring like a different wavetable. We can modulate the volume level. And then we could also put this on like the wavetable position. And if we run out of LFOs, it'll give us more. So we can have like 7, 8 if we want. Basically what we're trying to do here is we're adding different sorts of articulation and modulation to create a cool sound. So maybe we'll slowly increase over like a bar, some FM, something like that. So really endless possibilities, and that goes for like the noise generators. And then if there's something that we're adjusting a lot, so let's say we're doing like a traditional womp. So we'll quickly make one. which would typically just be a, oh, and about the oscillators, it comes with just a saw wave. We have to come in here and go to analog and go to basic shapes to get the basic shapes. I don't understand why they didn't just set it like this to begin with, but that's what you have to do. So a sine wave, and then we'll do this, we'll make this one a square. This is a pretty good like beginning for a womp here. A sine wave and a square. Maybe we'll use this to introduce a little bit of noise. So if we wanted to constantly be in control of the speed of this, we can right click this and actually map this to macro 1. So basically this is giving us a place to put all of our most used controls handy. And then this also makes it easier to just map these directly to Ableton if we need to. But so usually kind of a hot tip is if you get into presets, which we'll talk about in a second, and you see that there's mods mapped here, that's kind of like your telltale way of knowing like, okay, these are what I'm supposed to modulate and use to change the sound. Because the thing with presets, synthesizers, is if you're just going to press a key and use that exact sound, you might as well just use a sample. The cool part about synthesis is it gives us the flexibility to come in here and adjust these ourselves and do the modulation to make some crazy stuff. So that's kind of the overview of the macros. So that's pretty much everything having to do with the general face of Serum. Next, kind of going to the effects. So the routing goes from our oscillator, our noise generators, all this into our effects. And this is basically just all different sorts of effects within Serum. So we have like distortion. All different kinds of distortion in here. And any of this stuff, anything in general, but any of this stuff also can be mapped with the drag and drop from the LFOs. Hyper gives like a widening effect. We have like a flanger, phaser, a chorus. I'm not going to go over all the particular of what exactly a flanger, phaser, chorus, and all that is. I'll cover those in a different video. But so we have pretty much any effect we would need right here. And then we even have like a compressor so we can compress the sound and multiband compression. It's not quite OTT, but it's here if we need it. And then we have like a reverb, which actually sounds good. You can automate like a little reverb swell. And then we actually have another EQ that we can automate, so we can get some really cool textures out of this as well. And then we have also just a regular filter. And this actually gives us all the same filter options we had on the other filters. So we have between two filters and an EQ, plenty of movement we can put in here. And these do go in order. So if we need to move these, we can just drag them over here. The order of processing very much so does matter. And then over here we have the matrix tab. So this is basically going to show us all of our automation and mappings in kind of a linear way. This also actually gives us some options to map stuff where it's not visible within the main interface. For instance, if we come over here, we can go to global and go to master tune, and we can actually modulate the entire tune of the entire synthesizer. So let's map this to like macro 1. Maybe macro 2, since we have the LFO rate maps to macro 1. Master 2 is a great way to make like lasers and stuff like that. So if we mapped this to like different options. So we can come in here and map anything in this manner as well. So these are all the same settings we have within the other interface. We can just come in here and map them if it makes more sense, and we can adjust the amounts here. Global chaos is kind of like a cool, interesting thing they put in here. Chaos are actually LFOs. So chaos 1 has a more periodic kind of repeating sound to it, and then chaos 2 kind of randomly restarts. So these are just some additional options we have here. And then the last tab we have over here is global. So we have our 2 chaos rates we looked at. We have our unison settings. So again, these are all over here. Our voicings, our unison, width. And then we have some preference options here. So these are just, you know, up to you. If you like any of this stuff, you can hide the keyboard or double click to reset the controls, some oscillator settings. And for the general interface, that's about it. And then coming over here, we have our presets. So presets are a dime a dozen. There's a ton of good ones. My Serum preset collection is astounding. I've been building it since I started producing. This was the first synthesizer I started using. And they all kind of live here. I have all different kinds of stuff. Like I was saying, this synthesizer is so versatile that there's all different kinds of sounds we can kind of pull out of here. Like here's like some leads, a pluck, and then we have like some crazy basses. So as you can see, really the sky's the limit with Serum. Like you can really do some crazy off the wall stuff with Serum, especially if you're in like bass music and dubstep. This plugin is fire. Or like for respaces, like I just got a whole bunch of just straight respaces. And then like we talked about, there's like organic sounds. So we can come in here and maybe grab like a guitar. So you can click here, and you can actually come in here and like search them by characteristic or name. So here's like an acoustic guitar. It sounds pretty spot on for an acoustic guitar, honestly. And this is literally something that somebody synthesized. So one really cool practice that I highly recommend doing that I did for a while is like find a preset and then go and look at it and kind of like see what they're doing and what their thought process was. Because you can learn a lot about like where they're modulating and what they're doing to kind of like build your own sound. So we see here we have kind of like this really interesting envelope. We have this unique wavetable, which I think is probably just a guitar plug. And this is the way the LFO is kind of going through it and coming back a little bit. A little bit of movement in this filter here. We have like hyper. So they're really cool to kind of like dissect and see what's going on with them. And then kind of circling back to like we were talking about with the mod controls. So like there's like I don't know what this is, kind of like a voicey kind of deal. But with all these controls over here, it's basically telling us what's best to modulate. These are usually great controls to map within Ableton or whatever DAW you're working in and get some movement out of them this way. especially for like big bass sounds. So like that's like, I remember one thing I read on like a Skrillex interview is they're like, what's your secret? And he's like, automate everything, automate, automate, automate. So automate the LFO, you know, position, like just all that, like making all these changes. That's what's so cool about synthesis and Serum is you can really get like some cool textures and tones out and modulations that you can't get from a sample. And then if, you know, you make something you like, which you will at some point, you just click this floppy and you can save it. Over here, we have options for skins. So you can actually make your own skin. Here's like one from the school I went to, Icon. They got some like kind of crazy ones. This is kind of a popular one, Feed Me. So you can customize this and then you can change the size of Serum in general. And then here we have the menu. So we have some basic options. So we can like load a preset, init, which is what I've been doing the whole time. So kind of start it from scratch, revert to saved. You can read the manual, check for updates. If you get a Serum pack, so if you go online and like get a Serum presets pack, you can come down here and click show Serum's presets folder. That way it'll just pull this folder up and you have all your different folders for like your presets, your noises, your wavetables, your skins. And you would just come in here and drop them in the presets. So you can like keep them in the file or like drop them in here on their own, however you best like it. That way you don't have to go through like some crazy way of going and like finding where your preset folder is. You can just access it right here from Serum. So that's a pretty comprehensive overview of Serum. I'm not just kind of belt all that information out and leave you high and dry. Let's create a couple things real quick now that we got through all the different sections. So if I want to make a preset or if I'm starting to make a sound, I'll usually just start with a saw wave and then introduce a filter. What I've been doing a lot that I like is those kind of long, like trappy sustained leads. And for those, I'll do something like come over here and grab a basic shape, maybe 2 sounds, and then we're going to come down here to ring mod. And they give you all these LFOs, so it's cool to really take advantage of using all of them and creating different like rhythms within a sound. So let's do like let's load up like one of my like a double womp here. Maybe we'll do like a little reverb throw here. Take a look at some of my presets I've made over the years. I'm not really big on saving mine, but I do have a couple that I've made. So if you like something, it'll go to your user library. It's like an atmosphere I made. It's a kind of basic growl bass. So some of these I built off existing presets, which is something that's really cool to do. So if you like a sound, you can really make it your own with little to no effort. So if you're still not like Mr. Sound Design and know everything inside and out, you can actually adjust presets and like make them something to where they are indistinguishable from where you started. So see, I'll come over here and grab like a, let's grab like a bass or something like that. So just by like changing the wavetable, and maybe like filter. Maybe try a different filter. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but the point is now this is a unique sound that only we have, that we didn't have to do any crazy sound design to achieve. We just, you know, went off a pre-existing preset and made something that works for us. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. There is some more like really in-depth stuff you can do, but for the most part, this is pretty much all the controls for Serum. I'm going to include a video of making some of the most popular sounds in electronic music. But yeah, that's a basic rundown of Serum. I will note that this is about $160 or something like that. You can rent to own it on Splice, which is actually how I bought it when I first purchased it several years ago. You can pay $10 a month and it's not any more expensive, I don't believe. If it is, it's like $5 or $10 more expensive. And you just pay $10 every month for a year and a half and then you own it. And I would definitely say out of any synthesizer, this is the one you want to get. It's timeless. There's some really comprehensive and crazy ones coming out. This one, I think, is not going anywhere. It's not like massive where it's a little outdated, not really seen too much. Everybody's just using Serum as much today as they were 10 years ago. And again, it's a lot more user-friendly. So like if we come over here and say we open up like Phase Plant, which is phenomenal, but literally it comes like this and nothing's in here. And then you come in here and add an analog. And it's like these presets and this sound design is next level. Like all these different things here. And then these modules, you can click into them and change them. It can be really fun, but it's overwhelming. So the point being, I definitely think if you're getting into sound design, Serum's a great investment. And I will make sure to include more videos on kind of more in-depth and tutorials in the future. I will note there's a guy on YouTube called Rocket Powered. And this kid, I don't even know if he's around anymore. This was like 5 years ago. But he would literally do like remakes of any track. So he would do like Purple Lamborghini Stab, whatever. And they're all honestly like pretty good, pretty close to like what he's going for. So if you're looking for more like in-depth tutorials for specific sounds, this is definitely a good guy to check out. And then there's just like 1,000,001 different resources online on YouTube for learning sounds.